will move to the topic at hand today, which is the board's role in storytelling. And here's where we're headed this morning. My material is based on the book Stories That Stick by Kindra Hall. She has a lot to say in this book. It's been one of my favorites that I've used in webinars in Iowa. She has a lot to say about the power of stories and the characteristics of what makes a story powerful. So I'll take a look at that with you, and we'll talk about what stories there are to be told in library land and who might do the telling. So even though while this material is based on the book Stories That Stick, there was absolutely no expectation that any of you would have read this book before today, not at all. But I would inquire at the end of our time together if maybe you might be inspired to go pick up the book and read more about it. What I will do is to share what I feel are the most significant takeaways from the book. So that's kind of how we'll approach this. And this is how I landed on this idea to share books with board members, because with the State Library of Iowa, I coordinate two ongoing series that have been pretty long-lived, actually. One is called Big Ideas Book Discussions, and the other is called The Boardroom. I do a lot of training and webinars, workshops for the State Library on several topics, but these are series that I've kind of come to coordinate over the years, and they've become just really popular and really very enjoyable to do. In Big Ideas Book Discussions, I choose books well outside of library management, but they have plenty of application to library life. We've used books on workplace relationship, on leadership, technology, public speaking, and we discuss the connections to library service. So to get a little bit more mileage out of that material, it dawned on me a couple of years ago, why not take those same books and flip it into discussions with library boards? So that's what I've done for about the last 3 years. We take those same book discussions and apply it to the business of boards. And I think that's been an enjoyable way to approach board education as well. And just in the last couple of years, here are some of the titles that we've used in 20 and again in 21. In addition to Stories That Stick, which I really enjoyed, I have to tell you, I loved the book Upstream. And just a couple of weeks ago, we used the book Crucial Conversations in the Big Ideas discussion, and again in our boardroom series for Iowa boards. So if you don't choose among these titles, you could also do this amongst yourself and agree on a book that the entire board reads and discusses, whether it's a title on leadership or customer service, and then apply it to the work that you do. Now, that's a little bit of background behind those two webinar series in Iowa. This was the method to my madness in choosing the book Stories That Stick. Because in Iowa, we have a couple of standards for public libraries that speak to library promotion, publicity, and community relations. So I knew that by choosing Stories That Stick, that would be a fresh way to take a look at the board's role in helping the library meet these standards, but also to talk about the board's role in telling the library story. So here you can see a public library standard in Iowa calls for the libraries to promote their collections and services by using a variety of approaches to publicity. And you can probably see in this list roles that board members could play. You're all the recipients, I'm sure, of annual reports that come to you from your directors. You, in turn, could share the information in those annual reports with your friends and family circles, or with your business colleagues, or with your city partners. You could certainly take part in being a part of newspaper articles. Maybe once in a while, trustees could write an op-ed piece in the local paper. What about being a part of a TV or radio spot? I think that would be a really cool way for trustees to not just promote the library board and the work that they do, but to promote the library at the same time. So that's one standard that speaks to promotion and publicity. Here's another one. And maybe in this one, you can see even more involvement for library boards. Libraries develop community relations by regularly communicating with elected officials, business leaders, and civic organizations. This to me has library boards written all over it because you can all certainly attend city council meetings. You can help give those presentations to community groups and organizations if that's your cup of tea. Jamie LaRue will have some reassurances about that in just a little bit when we turn to a video clip. You could invite your city partners to come to the library to hold their meetings. You could certainly invite them to be a part of library strategic planning. And I hope that if there's an opportunity to join citywide planning, that the library would be a part of citywide strategic planning. So this was the method and the reason behind choosing stories that stick. The intent of these standards, besides relationship building, is really to help our communities better understand the value of libraries. Why is the library a great civic partner? How is the library a partner in education? How is the library a partner in the arts and the cultural scene? How is the library a contributor toward recreation and leisure activities in your communities? So just a little bit about the book and the author, Kindra Hall. Now get a load of her job title because I think this is way cool. Kindra Hall's job title is President and Chief Storytelling Officer at a consulting firm called Stellar Collective. It's a consulting firm that focuses on the strategic application of storytelling techniques to help with today's communication challenges. She's a sought-after keynote speaker. Among her clients have been Facebook, Hilton Hotels, Tyson Foods, and Target, and many, many more. Stories That Stick came out in 2019, and there you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, her newest book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. That's very new. That came out just in January of this year. So as I said, you would not have had to have read this book ahead of today. So let me begin sharing with you some of the really most important concepts from the book. And this is arguably the main concept from the book. The 4 components of a great story. Kindra Hall lays out these 4 things to make a story really compelling and very memorable. A good story will have these 4 components. It will have identifiable characters, authentic emotion, a significant moment, and specific details. Now, you might be madly writing and taking notes, and that's fine. That's how I remember things also, but Dan will provide these slides to you after today's program. So if you want to just sit back and not feel like you have to be note-taking, that's cool too. So I think to best bring to life these 4 characteristics of a compelling story, I want to share a video clip with you. It comes to us from Jamie LaRue. When he recorded this video, he was the director of the ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom. He is no longer in that position, I don't believe. He was formerly a library director for a system in Colorado. But he is also, in addition to Kendra Hall, he is also a sought after keynote speaker, let me say, and he goes all over the countryside doing library presentations. He was at the Iowa Library Association a couple of years ago, and that was a treat. He's a fabulous public speaker. And even though the video clip we're about to watch is outside the bounds of the book, it's nothing that Kendra Hall would have pointed us to. I wanted to share this as a library example to kind of bring forward those characteristics of the story. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop that share and come back and bring forward the video. Sorry if this maybe is a little clunky, but it takes a little maneuvering to.
Okay, I've been there.
Yes, to stop one and bring up the other. But here we go. We're going to play about 5 minutes of this. And here is where you might want to take notes because or at least remember these different points in his story, because we'll come back and talk about each one.
My name is Jamie LaRue of the American Library Association, and I'm here today to talk to you about how to tell a library story. And I want to begin with this idea. First, you may not feel comfortable being the one who tells the story, and that's okay. One of the most powerful ways to do this is to go out into the community and find someone who is a good speaker, already respected and not associated with the library. Go and invite that person to say, we have a script for you, and the script is available on the ALA.org website. And we want you to practice this and give it to a group of people that will arrange for you. Could be Rotary, could be a political group, could be an education group, could be a library book club. Typically, someone who's a good speaker likes to give talks. And prepared with the script, they're all set to do that. Caden was 3 years old, a very, very smart little boy. And like a lot of smart 3-year-old boys, he went through a phase where he started to stutter. Not at all uncommon. And typically for boys, typically at about that age, and it's just because the brain goes faster than the tongue, it takes a while to get things synchronized. Typically, that's not a problem. You read to your children, you rhyme with them, you sing songs with them, but mostly you're just patient, and the phase passes. But Caden's father was a jerk. And every time Caden would stutter, his father would stutter with him. He would say your name again, Caden, and he would laugh. Well, this went on for 2 years, after which time the mother decided the father was abusive in other ways and she got rid of him. But by then, Caden had a problem. He stuttered badly. But Caden was so smart. He was part of the 1% of the human race who taught himself to read. His mother brought him to the library all the time. And one day, when she was at the library, Caden looked over and saw a little girl reading to a dog. The dog's name was Max. He was a retired greyhound. Retired because on his very first day, he burst out of the gate, ran down the track, saw, stopped, smelled, and watered the roses. This ended his racing career. But he was then adopted by a childless couple who then discovered Max adored children. So they had him trained as a service animal, and he came to the library where children would read to him. So the little girl gets up and walks away, and Caden grabs his book, goes over, sits down, and begins to read. And at first everything is fine, and Max looked very interested. But then Caden got stuck, and he could no longer read. And as his mother watched in anguish, and Caden got more and more frustrated, half angry, half upset, he lifted his head and stared at the dog, and Max, radiating love and patience, put out his paw and just patted Caden on the forearm. Caden took a breath, and he started again. Now, I am not saying that all of Caden's problems disappeared in that moment. But his mother was watching, and she saw that change in him, and she said, I'm going to bring him back to read to that dog. I'm going to sign him up for speech therapy classes, and we're going to beat this. Well, a couple of weeks after this, the childless couple went off to Europe for 3 weeks, and they said, Caden, want to watch Max for 3 weeks? He said, yeah. So now we have Max, the best red greyhound in Colorado. And eventually, time went by, and one day the mother wrote 4 years later to the library director to say, wanted to let you know that Caden has now been cast in the lead role of The Wizard of Oz. Caden doesn't stutter anymore. Thank you, she said, for saving the life of my son. All across America, public libraries have programs where children come in and read to dogs in the library because dogs are such attentive listeners. Libraries change lives. Say it with me. Libraries change lives. Or today, as we would say as part of the library advocacy campaign, libraries transform lives. This is how we tell a library story. And let's break this down again. How does it begin? Give me a real person. Not just a situation. Now we serve teenagers, we serve senior citizens, we serve children. Caden was 3 years old, specific. Then give me a problem. That's the hook of the story. Caden stutters. That's the issue, and that's what gets you emotionally invested in this story. Then introduce library as supporting character, not the main character. Library, what do we do to intervene, to assist with this? We have a program where you come and you read to dogs. And then give me one fact to ground the story, so I know you're not just making it up. And if I say, many, many libraries around the country provide programs for dogs, I say, yeah, okay, that's reasonable, I believe that. And the last thing is, as a preacher friend of mine used to say, give them the phrase that pays. Give them a short, succinct, memorable phrase that will carry that message home. And so note again that this is the process through which we don't just keep people entertained, we're establishing a message of value, and we're doing it in a way that changes people's minds.
Bonnie, I need to unmute you. There we go.
All right. So I'll stop it there and ask if any of you, have you maybe seen that video clip before in your travels? Oh, I see somebody nodding, yes.
I think he might have alluded to that, and it wasn't the same, but we had him for an advocacy training, and so we do have a video in our learning management system where he kind of talks about a similar storytelling process. So it sounded familiar to me a little bit.
Right, and if you noticed, he had some different characteristics. There you go. He had some different characteristics of what makes for a good story. They differed a little bit from Kendra Hall. For Jamie, it was find a real person, relay a real problem, talk about how the library intervened, and give me a happy ending. Yeah. So just before we move on from this, let's bring it back to Kendra Hall's characteristics of the story. And this is a really softball question, but go ahead and use chat to type in the identifiable character or characters. There actually, I think there was more than one. Dan, let me know if you would, what people are saying till I bring up my chat here.
Sure. We'll give you time to find your keyboard.
That's right. If you have to get up from where you're seated.
I definitely, I think, have my favorite character from the story. But okay, we definitely identified our main character, probably, I guess, would be our child.
Right.
The dog,
Caden.
Max, I believe,
and
was the dog's name. That was my
and the dog, I think. Yep, I think.
And we had Mom too.
And Mom, I think. Yeah, I think there really is more than one character, but you remember Caden because you remember the authentic emotions. So what do you think? What did you think of with Kendra Hall's suggestion that the second characteristic is authentic emotion. What did that mean to you from this story?
Shay mentions the dad being less than mom and dog, and I think that I mean, I felt mad when when she talked about that. So I think that goes for the emotion part.
I do too. I do too.
Mhm.
And I think it can also fit under those specific details because that he said it really quickly. He said Caden's father was a jerk. But he also then went on to show how the father would make fun of his stuttering. So that's a specific detail. It's also emotion, but the emotion is also Caden's embarrassment and his frustration. So the significant moment?
And feel free to put that in chat. And this is a time too where you can
Yeah.
figure out the Zoom unmute. I know it moves all around the screen, the elusive buttons of Zoom, but Randy pointed out the dog touching his arm. I think you can really visualize that.
Yes,
That kind of
for
touch.
sure.
He needed it.
For sure. Just discovering the reading dog therapy, discovering that on behalf of the mom. Um, I think another significant moment was when the neighbors went on vacation and lent Max the dog to Caden while they were on vacation. So there are a lot of significant moments, and I loved one of the significant moments was what Jamie LaRue wants us to end our stories with is a happy ending. I'm all for that. And that is the fact that Caden went on later to get the lead role in the local production of The Wizard of Oz. That's just a wonderful happy ending. So I appreciate you doing that. You're circling back to his story and sharing your thoughts about these four characteristics. You know, I think that our tendency in storytelling is that we speak too much in generalities. We tell some great stories, but we tend to say libraries serve children, libraries serve teens, libraries serve seniors. But to really connect with an audience, as both Kendra Hall says and Jamie shows by example, we have to be more specific. A real person can be captured in just a few phrases, in just a few words, actually. Caden was 3 years old. Caden stuttered. So think about those ideas behind the best in storytelling, and don't you wish we all could do public speaking like Jamie LaRue does public speaking? I know I have wished that myself a time or two.
Bonnie, I think that
Yeah,
maybe there's a Zoom floating window that's causing us to have a bar over number 4.
whoops.
Maybe it's the control panel from Zoom that's floating. We can't really see what it is, but it blocks our sight. It seems to be Zoom
Oh,
related.
is it gone now?
No, it still seems to be there for me. There is
I don't,
better. If you can drag it down so
I'll
it's
drag
not,
it down. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
it's all right. But you're right about the Jamie LaRue being a great storyteller. And at first it's almost a little off-putting for me to hear him because he's he almost seems like he's selling it too good, but then the story, the emotion of it and seeing that it's an actual it's feasible that it happened. It's like, oh, this really hits it home. But
Oh, for
he's very
sure.
polished.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And what struck me too when I revisited the book, and this quote came from Kendra Hall. She writes, "You have to start strategically by establishing the normal. the way things were before something changed. So you have the normal, the explosion, and the new normal. So Jamie's story hits all three of those aspects as well. The explosion, of course, was Caden being introduced to a reading therapy dog, and then his new normal was to really conquer the stuttering and go on to star in The Wizard of Oz. But also, when I was revisiting this book, what struck me too was that this book came out in 2019, and that was pre-pandemic. And so it was just weird to me that I came across this quote, the normal, the explosion, the new normal. We can all identify and have plenty of stories to tell, I'm sure, about what the normal, if you will, library service might have been like in your communities before COVID rolled through. And maybe what that, which was the explosion, and then maybe what that left in its wake was maybe some new and different, creative, inventive ways to provide library service that hadn't been as much explored before pandemic as they were post-pandemic. So you all have those kinds of stories, I'm sure, and you're welcome to use chat to let us know. I love to hear from other boards and other audiences, just what might have been the new normal for your library post-pandemic? What kinds of things are you doing now and fully intend to continue doing? Just because the pandemic brought it about and it turned out to be a really cool service twist. I often hear curbside service was something that really wasn't much talked about or done before COVID, but after COVID, I hear quite often from libraries that say they're just rolling with it. So you all have stories like that, and you're welcome to share those in chat as we move on to another question that I'd like to get your feedback on. Here's another question. What significant moment stories are you gathering? And how do you find them? And if you found a couple, please share those in chat as well. I love to gather those kind of stories from different audiences as well. And imagine if, given the board's role in advocacy, the stories you might tell to funders or city partners or legislators. Think of the impact those stories could have if you find the significant moment, the real person, the real problem, the memorable character, and specific details. Anything you would like to share with the group about the stories that you found that have really shown the library to be in a great intervention role, where the library has intervened and maybe has helped solve a problem to bring about a happy ending? Whoops. Whoops, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of that goofy bar. I don't know why that won't go away, but
Yeah, it seems to be tied to the chat being up.
mm-hmm.
Kim from Sabetha, the Mary Cotton Library, highlighting her dyslexic font collection. But I think some of us maybe have seen her kind of marketing across our region system. So it's been very well received, she's saying, by
Very cool.
lots of groups. So the parents and teachers, and I'm guessing the kids that do have dyslexia, little opens up a world, I would guess, to them in that realm. I would guess that there's maybe more resources for dyslexic font and e content these days. but I would guess that print has always been a big barrier for people who suffer from that. So Kim followed up a little bit too,
Oh, very
saying that
good.
the kids raise their reading levels an entire grade level. So that's the happy story at the end.
There you go.
Leave them
There's
on
your
a
happy
positive
ending.
note.
Yeah, there's your
And
happy ending.
reading enjoyment is evident, so it's a measurable something that we can see. That I guess that could be your facts possibly too.
There you go. There's specific details, right? Yep. You know, you might think that it might be hard for board members to find and gather these stories, maybe because you're not in the day-to-day. You're not there to witness patron interactions in the day-to-day like our staff are. But there's still a very deceptively simple way to gather those stories, those impact stories, when you are on the library board, and that is just to ask people, ask your friends, your family, circles, ask your colleagues. It might sound boring, but you can still have fun with the ask. There was a library in Wisconsin, I'm sorry, I forget the name of the town, that asked their residents, their patrons, why do you visit the library and what is the value of the library in your life? And the staff received so many responses. They, of course, shared those with the board. They started posting the comments on Facebook, and that brought about even more commentary. So that really is a great way to engage the community. This is a good, a really super good resource for you to use. Libraries Transform, and some of you, maybe many of you, have visited the Libraries Transform website before. It is a public awareness campaign, and it comes to us from the Public Library Association. And the entire intent is to raise awareness about the value and the impact of library services. Today's libraries are not just about what's in the collection, but it's about what libraries do for people and with people. So Libraries Transform is a great resource for you to use to help tell your library's story. And one of the really fun aspects of Libraries Transform are these because statements. These are already, pre-designed. These are graphics that are available to you free for the download from their website. And these are answer the question, why are libraries important? What impact does the library have? And there are so many of these because statements, and they freshen them up all the time. It seems that every time I go to the Libraries Transform site, I find new ones. The one on the right I had not seen before, prepping for this program, but I love that one. The one on the right that says, because you have to get online to be able to learn online. So these are readily available to you to print and to use in your own promotion. But what's also cool is that you can find blank because statements, and you could print those and ask your patrons, ask your board members, ask your friends group, ask your city partners to answer the because statement in their own words. You can make it very personal, you can make it very customized, and then talk about sharing those results. Here's an example of what one library did. They gathered these because statements. They used both the pre-produced ones from the website, but they also used very personalized, customized ones, and they just plastered library bulletin boards and windows and walls with their answers. And even cooler, as you can see from the one on the left there, the people who leave these answers, this commentary, it's really testimonials, right? And so to get permission to use people's testimonials is important. Even better if they'll be willing to share a photo. And you can see how this makes a very personalized story about why the library is important in these people's lives. So I want to just bring up one more video clip here at this point to show you how one library used, hang on, and this, come back to this. This will show you how one library in Pickering, Ontario, Canada, asked their library users to fill out these because statements. And then rather than a posting on bulletin boards or walls, they actually made a video. All right, had any of you seen that before? That video clip? I think though, with your tech savvy staff out there, I bet you could replicate that at your own library using, as I said, friends group members, using the library board for sure, using your city fathers and mothers and daughters to take part in a promotion like that.
I really like that because template, and I think that, you know, in library land, we have to give ourselves permission to grasp the things that work with our peers across state or across international lines as well. But just kind of something that you can plug in, like you were talking about, it gives you a template and a direction to go. And then even if it's not video, I think you already kind of mentioned if people would, you know, allow you to use their photo too. I know we talk
Yes.
about in this PR work and promotion how important it is to have actual photos from your library that you're able to put up on your website or use in your kind of social campaigns. And so to be collecting all these stories and these pictures, even if it's not going to be something that you're going to be able to have that ability to make a video, at least not this year, but start collecting those things and have a place where you can store them that the library can hold on to, I think is just, and you might get to that later, Bonnie, but I just encourage you guys just to do anything you can when you hear these good things, that you record them somehow on paper or in a document.
Or in a strategic plan. What what? And maybe this might become something you want to do if you have a section of your strategic plan about library promotion and marketing. Maybe this is in your future in the coming months. Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I think just tucking these ideas away is great. You'll have an archive of things you can try on for size. Well, I want to move into a couple of other areas, just two other areas really, that I think belong in this program on the board's role in storytelling. And these won't be specific examples of a specific person, but these will be really more related to the library as a city service, as a county service, right? And to really underscore the importance of libraries as a community investment. This is another good quote from Kendra Hall, and this really, really resonated with me. She writes, anytime the people who use a service are not the ones who pay for the service, fundraising can get tough. And the words you see down there at the bottom of the screen, here's what else gets tough, taxpayer education. Those are my words. Those are my thoughts because that's been like a lifelong pet peeve of mine. I really do believe that taxpayer education is a story that needs telling because in my experience, many years now in library land, I think far too many people do not equate public library service with their taxes, with the tax assessment that they pay. And some of that painfully true, some of that is on us in the profession because for 300 years, we've been using the phrase free public library, free, 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 come on in, everything's free. When really nothing about it is free, right? Nothing about it is free, unless you're the one who doesn't pay for the service, as Kendra says. So I do a whole workshop on this, you guys. I won't belabor the point here, and lucky for you, we don't have time, but I do have some ideas before I leave this section. I do have some ideas for how to approach taxpayer education without being sarcastic, which is my thing, my go-to, or without being caustic. We'll do it with kindness. Here are some ideas, and I think board members can really easily get in on this action. How often have we seen this sign posted on highways, city streets, highways, construction zones, your tax dollars at work if it's a public infrastructure project of some kind, right? Your tax dollars at work. Sometimes we see the phrase, pardon our progress, which I've never liked. I way prefer this instead. Your tax dollars at work. This is used for public projects. Well, here's what else is evidence of your tax dollars at work, and that is public library service. Again, I think taxpayer education is so sorely needed, and it's a story that needs telling. So what if your library, maybe during National Library Week, maybe any other time of the year, might plant some flags in the front lawn of your library that says your tax dollars at work. You're not building anything, you're not remodeling or renovating your library necessarily. It's just a message, a very easy breezy message that helps to reinforce that library service is tax funded. And I know that there are differences in how the tax situation applies in Kansas versus in Iowa, but you know, tell the story as it is true for you in Kansas. I have to say before I leave this photo, this is my hometown library, you guys. This is in Platteville, Wisconsin. This is the third location for the public library in my hometown, and by far the most beautiful modern library. This covers a full city block, you guys, and Platteville is a town of 12,000 people. So this is by far the most beautiful building that the town has achieved for library service. And you can also tell they don't have a front lawn. So they couldn't plant a flag, but they certainly have lots of windows where they could put up because statements from their patrons, or they could put up signs occasionally that say your tax dollars at work. You have to appreciate how beautiful this building is at night. All of those windows on the second floor, all of those light up in different colors. Just saying. Here's another thing you guys could do, and this is really easy. This is an exercise that I do for myself from time to time, and that would lead you to think maybe I need more hobbies in my life. I browse library websites and I look for how many times I see the word free appear on library websites. And I also look for this phrase to be replicated. This comes to us from the Sioux City Public Library, and it might be too small for you to see, but what's circled in red at the bottom of the screen is one simple declarative sentence that says Sioux City Public Library is funded through city property tax dollars. Now, you know, will everyone see this? No. Will everyone see this who visits the library website? Probably not, but plenty of people will. And it's just an easy way, and I think a significant way, to raise that awareness about the public library as a community investment and to splash it on the page where people are interested in getting a library card. That's a savvy place to put it. Speaking about the library as a community investment, shout out to the Kansas State Library. We talk about this in Iowa, but we don't have this gizmo linked on our state library website. So maybe I need to make that suggestion. The Kansas State Library has given all of you a return on investment calculator. It's a gizmo that you can click that you can then add to your website, I would imagine. Dan is your man for, I would guess, for helping you know how to do that. Don't email me and ask how to do that. Um, but it's really a very cool awareness raising technique that helps put the local library into the realm of a business, and it puts a dollar value on the materials that are checked out, on the programs that people attend. It's very cool. And this is what it looks like when you click that link. This is an interactive tool, and you can see, maybe you can't very readily see it, but I goofed around with it and I put some numbers in that left-hand column. I said that on one visit to the library, I checked out 5 children's books. I downloaded 2 ebooks to my Kindle. I borrowed also 3 magazines. And while I was there, it happened to be the day when I was there to attend a program. Let's just say I was there to attend the book discussion group, right? When you add all of that up, it calculates the value of those services, and it came to $101. And that was just artificially, in my example, that was just one visit to the library. So, all of this then begs the question, how does that figure compare with the amount of taxes that you and your fellow residents pay for library service in your community? You need to know the answer to that. But this return on investment calculator is a really cool way to talk about the library as a community investment. If you want to use chat and tell us if any of your libraries there in the Northeast Kansas regional system are using this, I would love to know that. And Dan, you can stop me if I've misstated your assistance with this. I only know it wouldn't be me to tell you how to do it.
No, you're right. Robin
Okay.
and I can help with website things. A lot of us use WordPress, and that's not true for everybody here. We have a lot of
Sure.
broad variety, but any of these types of tools that we want to implement, that's a good place for just getting a call out to the office to Neckles. So we did have lots of other points. There was about privacy issues, and I didn't know if you would get to that eventually or not. I guess the question is how, we obviously can't just take stories from people without their permission. And we talked about getting permission, I think, for photos and if
Right.
they wanted to be in a video. Do you have any tips or any feedback about how you go about balancing that as we do in libraries at all times? Just, that need for privacy, but also the need to market and share stories.
Well, it really will hinge on the person, that identifiable character or characters, and the impact that the library had in that person's life or in their use of the library. So you have to make the ask and ask if it's okay if you can use real names and a real story. Because you're going to encounter so many great stories that will impact, that shows how the library impacts people. You have to make the ask. And I think most people, especially when it's a happy ending, would be okay with being a part of that storytelling. Um, those are my initial thoughts. You're welcome to add to that. Um, your thoughts there from your regional standpoint.
Right. I think I don't know if Shelley will say anything later, but I think that we going forward would like to promote having that kind of that game plan of what you need to do to make sure that you have those resources available when you need them, but then also that you are making sure you're using the right waivers or that type of
Yes,
thing.
waivers. Yes. Kind of have that tucked away in your programming policies or your PR promotional policies.
And I'm not sure exactly which libraries do this, but I know some of our libraries on their checkout receipts will give you a total of how much it would have been had you bought those books, and which is a very similar idea, but
Yes.
mhm.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because library ILS systems, yes, some software will also allow you to do that after checkout when they print a receipt and tuck it inside the book. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that, because I had forgotten that some ILS systems will do that. Well, here's one more way. Another approach toward taxpayer education, again, without, thumping people over the head with this. I'm not suggesting that. Um, but I am suggesting that we can all look for relatable comparisons between what you pay in your tax assessment for library service and compare that to what you pay for other entertainments. Um, are the taxes you pay for library service on par? So my example is, I went online to a golf course in Lawrence and I chose Eagle Bend Golf Course. And here's what I discovered. If you were to go golfing, today is a Saturday, at Eagle Bend Golf Course, and you're going to play 18 holes of golf and you're going to pull your own cart behind you, that would be $28 for 18 holes. If you were going to play 18 holes and you wanted to rent a motorized cart, that would cost $49. So, and that's just one round, 18 holes on one Saturday during the summer. Most golfers go out much more often than once a summer. So kind of look for those relatable comparisons. I think that's very valid. It's a very valid way to raise awareness about what people pay for library service in their tax assessment. This proposition also works, I have found out, with friends groups, because I will often work with friends groups in Iowa, in my district, and friends groups will often find themselves kind of, debating how to revisit the membership dues that they ask of people to belong to the friends group. And I give this example all day long. because we're all kind of have the tendency to kind of lowball the number to belong to a friends group. But if they were to play, again, give the example of renting a cart for 18 holes of golf on a weekend or a holiday at a public golf course, that could be upwards of $50. So why is that an out of reach estimate? And it's not just golf. That's not everybody's jam. You could try to equate it with take a family of 4 to the movies for a Saturday afternoon. That can be a kind of a spendy proposition, especially if you pass by the concession stand. So that's just a way, just a couple of ideas to help you really raise awareness about the library as a community investment. This is another story I think needs telling, and this can really be pretty easily done because you're the one telling the story. What do you do in your conversations with friends and families and business associates? What do you do? What do you say about what your trusteeship means to you? Why did you agree to join the library board? Were you approached by someone or did you step up and volunteer? What has that experience meant to you? Think about how has the time on the library board been for you? Has it been educational? Has it been unduly challenging? Has it been rewarding? Dare I say, has it been fun? To me, in my experience, again, this is a story that largely goes untalked about. So I would say, let's talk about it. Please use the chat feature to let us know if you talk about your experience on the library board to people other than your fellow your fellow library board members. I have some ideas here for how you might do this as you're thinking and as you're typing. This is a wonderful quote about the value and the importance of library trustees in the life of our public libraries. Trustees are powerful advocates. Through the coordination, hard work, and determination of trustees, new libraries have been built, budgets have been restored and increased, and a new respect has been generated for the powerful role that libraries play in communities. I love that quote. It comes to us from the American Library Association. But what I love even more is that Lawrence Public Library has inserted this quote onto its website, onto the pages where people would go to look up the library board's activity, the web pages that highlight what the library board is doing. People will see this quote. I think that is a great storytelling technique about the library board's role. You may be still typing your answers to my other question about do you talk about your trusteeship, but let me know this as well. Fingers at the ready, true or false, Kansas Public Library standards include a standard that the library has a website and social media sites. I'll pause for just a minute as you think about that.
Feel free to weigh in on the true or false on the standards. If it's easier for you to talk about, I like to think of it as a scale, as you were talking about, as are you like a 5 that you never stop talking about the library service?
Right, that's a good
one. Are
one.
you more like a 1 where, you know, you're kind of bashful of nobody wants to hear about that? That could be the whole Kansas mentality at times where, oh, nobody'd want to hear about what I have to say, or, you know, nobody wants to hear about that.
I like approaching it that way though, Dan, on a scale of 1 to 3 or 1 to 5.
Shelley
Yes.
turns it all the way to 11, and she said she's a 10.
That's awesome. Like,
that.
do you never shut up or refrain from talking about how fun it is to be on the library board? Well, this
We
is a
had
softball
Ken
question.
I was just going to say we had Ken from Williamsburg who had said earlier that he was going to include our thinking about including that ROI on the Williamsburg website,
Yes.
because he does their work on that. He's been around at the Williamsburg Library for longer than I've been around Nichols, so that's a good amount of time. But then
That's
he had said
awesome.
that down in Williamsburg and then probably all around there, I don't know how his stomping grounds, but he's always talking up the library to potential new board members.
Oh, that is
And
super.
got to get that, new folks being interested in those board roles.
That is a great way to recruit prospective trustees, is just to have that kind of, those kinds of positive conversations with people. Absolutely. Have most people weighed in on the trueness or the falseness
They're holding
of
back
this?
on us.
They're holding back.
I'm
Okay,
sure
well
they're
then
thinking to themselves,
I'll tell you, it's a softball question. So the answer is true, actually. And here's what your standard says in Kansas, that the library has an internet page, a web page, and or social media that is actively maintained and that contains current information about library services and programs. So yes, indeed, that is true. And you heard at the top of the hour, at 10 o'clock, you heard and saw Shelley O'Brien, which Dan tells me is pretty new to the staff at Nichols. And she's there to assist your libraries with marketing and PR efforts. So that's a very cool position to have at a regional system. All right. Well, with our remaining time together, I have a few more examples that we'll talk about visual storytelling that will help us talk about both that and sharing the happiness that you feel as in your position as library trustees. So just a few ideas toward more visual storytelling. It's really hard to improve upon this technique as a technique um, to improve upon our statistical reporting. One of the best things to be designed in recent years to me is the infographic. It's a great technique. It takes all of the data that we collect, and believe me, we collect a lot in library land. I know we do in Iowa. I'm sure you do in Kansas as well. But I think to flip those statistics and all of those raw numbers without much comparison it can be kind of a deadly recitation if that's all that's reported. But if you can flip it into a more visually appealing report, that's what infographics do for you. And I love this example, comes to us from the Sioux City Public Library. This is my city. This is their fiscal 21 annual report, and this has been condensed with all of the data they collect throughout the year. This has been condensed to a 4-page full color spread. And you can see there is, of course, some narrative and some paragraphs, but it's also interspersed with these design elements like photos and clip art and talking points, and it's just a really, really nice way to talk about to highlight what the library did in the past year. Their annual report from 21 talked about how the library responded to the COVID crisis with new service approaches, as your libraries did. They entered into a great community partnership with a neighborhood pharmacy in my neighborhood, actually called Drilling Pharmacy, during the intense time of COVID vaccinations. The public library partnered with Drilling Pharmacy, and they started circulating hotspots, and they subscribed to Canopy. All of those things in FY21. This is a visual way to tell the story about a library board, and this example comes to you from your neighbor in Missouri. This is St. Charles City County Library. And again, remember one of those 4 components that Kendra Hall tells us. One of the 4 components of a great story are specific details. And you can see here on this splash page that highlights the library board business. You see it hooks them up. It hooks people up with the board agendas, with the board minutes. I love the masthead across the top. That's just, it's all very artistic and very, just very colorful. I spend a lot of time, as I said, visiting library websites. I kind of sort of need to in my work to find some cool examples. So I think it's fair to say that, and I do want to make this point, that I'm not expecting library board members to be the web site managers for the library. Not at all. That's a staff position, but I know that all of you are online, proving that today. You are Zoom users and you are searching websites, browsing websites, and you probably have your own social media feeds. Share what you find. Share your discoveries. If you land on something really cool, like someone mentioned, really digging the idea of those return on investment calculators. If you see things like that in your web travels, share that with your library staff and ask if that's something that you could incorporate on your library's website. And also do this, examine your own website for how easy it is or not so easy it is to find a splash page about the library board. Sometimes it's like a scavenger hunt when I'm looking around looking for something, and it shouldn't be a scavenger hunt. It should be prominent, and ideally it should be as appealing and as artistic as this. This is another cool thing that I discovered from the Lawrence Public Library on their page that highlights the business of the board. They have actually shared the board's orientation packet, the full packet that's given to new trustees, of course, but they've also put it on their website, which I've never seen this done before. And I think this is a cool idea for anyone interested in board service. What a great packet of information to inspire people and at least to lead them to a better understanding of the business of the board, as I like to say. So I like that idea very much. And I really dig this idea. This is Topeka Shawnee County Public Library. And this is becoming more and more commonly found to have not just a listing of the trustees' names, but I think photos to go along with it. Now, the fact that these trustees put up their addresses and their phone numbers, that is totally up to you. I would think, especially with the question that came up about privacy, I would lean toward not doing that, and just have the person's name, whether they're the board chair, the vice chair. I also like to see a notation about their term of service, or when their term is about to expire. I think that's a very handy place to put it. It's a logical place to put it. But I would tend to not put up that private information. But that's, I guess, that's a personal preference. But it dawned on me to circle back to that question that came up about privacy. But I'll just leave it here for just one more minute while I propose this idea. Take away the personal information, leave the name, leave the photo, and then what if you were to hover over the board member's name and there's a pop-up, and the pop-up talks about what this person's trusteeship means to them, why they joined the library board, what their experience has been, whether it's personalized about their trusteeship, or maybe it's a more general feeling about the public library that they are on the board to serve. I think that would be a way that library board members could use those because statements and attach it to their name and their photo on the website. I joined the library board because. just an idea as another way to involve all of you in telling the library story. We are very nearly out of time. And so what I will leave you with is to come full circle back to where we started this morning, back to my big ideas book discussions that we do in Iowa. This is the book we're taking up in August. And we'll be flipping it into the boardroom webinar in August as well. We're going to take up this book titled Making Numbers Count by Chip Heath. I really gravitated toward this book right away when I saw that it had come out, because I've used books by the Heath brothers in the past. Chip and Dan Heath are brothers who typically write together, although this book is not the one that they did together. But I've used their books in the past, and I love their books. They did one called The Power of Moments. We used that in Big Ideas, and it had so much to say about customer service interactions. And they wrote the book called Upstream, which has been one of my all-time favorites. That's about problem solving. So that was one reason why I chose this book that's coming up in August. But another reason is because look at what we've talked about in terms of statistics and how data and numbers and statistics, they need talking about, but maybe in more creative ways through infographics or other ways to get those points across. So I'm sure that this book will have lots of advice about using data and then flipping that data into more compelling stories to tell. So with that, we are very nearly out of time. I will leave you as we wrap up with some of these questions to ponder. You will remember that today we've talked about Stories That Stick by Kendra Hall. I shared with you the main takeaways, the main concepts from that book. So we talked about the 4 characteristics of a compelling story. We talked about the idea that you could tell a story talking about the normal. Then there was some kind of a change, major change or explosion, as she puts it, and then the new normal. We talked about gathering significant moment stories and making those stories very specific with a specific and memorable lead character and with details enough, facts enough to ground the story. So I'm hoping that you're thinking about continuing today's conversation back home at future board meetings. If you feel you might want to do that, if you feel you might want to plan to pick up the book, to read it and discuss it after today with your board, that would be a cool, happy ending for me. But if you want to share, and maybe now, Dan, is a good time to throw open the mics, a good time to share your thoughts about the concepts from the book and how you might use some of the material from today.
Definitely feel free to unmute yourself. I don't think I can unmute all, but if you raise your hand or something, you need help to do it, feel free to do that. I wanted to point out a couple of things while we give time to people if they do have things or just want to think about what they wanted to say, is that Robin Hastings put into chat some books from the Next Search catalog. They're on visual design of information, making beautiful and effective
Oh, cool.
statistics. And on that topic of data visualization, I know we have some directors here, so they already know that this past spring we had Linda Hofshire from the Colorado, well, she was with the Colorado State Library. I have to update my mind on that, but she's with Ripple, if you're familiar with that program. But she came to our directors in person and talked for a good, I guess it was the afternoon session about data visualization. That's her whole bag in libraries. It's all about data visualization. So she gave us a bunch of tools that are in our online learning page. And that was one of those things that I was talking about early that you can use. And that might fall on your staff to do, but also if you're an educated board member, then you know what to look for. And so when somebody hands you an annual report, you can kind of have that conversation with, yeah, I like what you're saying, but I think you could capture my attention a little bit better with some stronger data visualization. I wanted to put more links in the chat too, so I'm trying to multitask.
Great.
Bonnie, this is Shelley. I wanted to add that I really like how you're using storytelling with statistics and then storytelling with the impact and people's emotions, because I am always interested in impact and emotions, but my friends may be persuaded by statistics. And I think having both is very, very persuasive. So thank you for pointing both of those out.
Well, thank you, Shelley. I think both of those are necessary. People do respond differently. Visual learners versus, not such visual learners. And I'm just a big fan of infographics. I think it's just such a great way to relay a lot of information, but in a more appealing, concise way. Yeah, thank you, Shelley.
Ken from Williamsburg. I wanted to add that one thing when we were struggling financially, I put together a PowerPoint presentation that showed what our resources were and what our tax base was and how it differed from state taxes and property taxes, and did infographics that made it clear, and went to townships around and showed our patron base and how it was bigger than just our little bitty town. And we had other townships that went, oh, we can support you because you actually are, the patrons you're supporting are from our area. So little things like that to think of also for some of the smaller groups.
Oh, that's a great one. And to think that, and you're on the board,
Yes,
I presume, yeah. And for a board member to step in to wrangle that, I think is fabulous. Thank you.
And I think, something like that can be a place that you just store some of those stories along with your statistics. It could be as simple as that. Use that as kind of your holding place, is put it in slides, those pictures, or type out the stories. That way you have it ready to go.
Yeah. And what a cool aha moment, right? For those people who maybe didn't connect the library service with the taxes. Yeah.
I feel like Mike McDonald might be thinking about Policy Map, which is a tool that we have at Neckles that, along with some of those statistics that are available that you can draw on, like the census, all that, but we also have the ability to pull up some things and map it out. So Ken's thoughts about where your users are from, we can kind of do some overlays, and I know he would like to make that available to folks.
Yeah, we talk about that, it seems like, all day long. Also at the State Library of Iowa, is just to raise that awareness about where people live is important in terms of where their library service comes from and who's paying for it. I'm going to stop my slides at this point, since we're almost out of time, but this allows me to catch up here with faces and with some chats that have been flying past me while I've been otherwise occupied.
You're off stage now. So you mentioned how you hope that people continued the conversation just locally. And I kind of wanted to throw that out there, not to get too prickly here, but the part of the accreditation standard asks for 2 hours of CE. And so what we kind of think of with this trustee training at an hour and a half is that you will take a little bit of time at a board meeting to kind of bounce ideas, what was on the mark today for your size of library, and what doesn't apply to you as much, because it is such a wide group. We've got people from what we consider pretty large libraries to, as Ken would say, our little town with great barbecue. So not everything is going to be a one size fits all. I could see that some of you might be like, that's crazy, I'm not going to do that work. I work other ways for the board. But use what you can, but then also see what other people are doing. If Lawrence is putting these types of things on their website, can you work with Neckles to see about getting that page up to date, what kind of content you're going to need. So I guess we kind of leave you with those thoughts of, we can help you with that, but maybe do a little bit more work together. If you have people, I know that not everybody had a full quorum for this, is that we'll take the recording and we'll get it up, and I'll send it out to the same directors as that we did before, so they can share it. But then it'll also be available through that online learning page. So if you need help getting an account set up, I'll be happy to do that. But then, so it's a good idea to let everybody have that chance to watch the recording, and then maybe at the next board meeting, you can think about it and then give your thoughts with each other. So just an idea about moving forward on it.
That's a swell idea. And if I had to leave you with just one encouragement, it would be to tell the story about your own library trusteeship and what it means to you, and splash that on your website and talk about it with friends and family and colleagues, so that people would be very inspired to want to take on library board service when there's a vacancy to be filled. So tell your own story, by all means, right along with library service stories.
Well, those are some great parting words. I appreciate that. I wanted to thank Bonnie for working with us throughout this year to get this presentation together. It's one of those things where you start messaging back and forth probably before the holidays, and trying to plan these things out ahead of time and see what's the right fit for a very diverse group of individuals from all walks of life. And so thanks, Bonnie, for working with us, because you make it just so easy, and you really kind of get how we do things in Kansas, because Iowa is so similar in so many different ways. And I also want to thank Bonnie because she had agreed to be on our podcast that we have for Neckles, and you can get to that season 1 through our homepage. But so later this year, well, first we have to record it, but she's been gracious enough to meet with Anna Foote and I to be one of our guests on that program, which is about 15 minutes long. It's a way to hear more about what goes on in the library world. Some of it might be relevant to you as a trustee or a library director. So, any thoughts from Bonnie? I again appreciate your time. If you have to leave us, that's great. And then I just wanted to make time, if any of the Neckles consultants had anything that they wanted to impart on people before we send you out. I know we're over our time, so if you got to go, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Dan, and to all the Neckles staff there, Mike and Robin and Shelley. Thanks so much for asking me to join you. It's been my pleasure. And thanks to all of you for logging in on a Saturday morning. That's impressive.
Absolutely. If I don't have any other final comments, there is one other plug I just wanted to make before we end this, is that next week on Thursday, I know this might not work with your schedule, but at 1:30 p.m., we have an event with Martin Garner. He is an individual who edited the 10th edition of the Intellectual Freedom Manual through ALA. He's also in the Office of Intellectual Freedom. So he should have a really great hour's worth of content about just everything about people's ability to find the content that they're looking for out there at the public library, and other libraries as well, I guess. Probably talk about schools and maybe even academics. All right. Well, thank you again. We'll see you all later. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up, dalexander@neckles.org. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.